Hey, great. You guys filled the room. I am very much hoping that what happens here today will be useful to you. You can see there that, I don't know, if you look carefully, you'll see that that image is an AI-generated image. Okay? So I gave it a prompt, something like science and religion are enemies. And I didn't quite get what I asked for, right? But I really actually enjoy that image. I love the vibe of those two and getting on. And just by way of a little bit of a disclaimer, well, not disclaimer, just sort of full disclosure. I'm a little bit of both of those guys. Okay, I think you heard that I was crazy enough to get myself an education on both sides, and I'm passionate about both science and religion. So that's hopefully what you're going to be getting today. My title is a little bit more generic than the one announced. Okay, the one announced I think was Science and Biblical Faith. Some of what I say today will apply to religion in general, but other things that I talk about will be about science and Christianity in particular. Hoping that makes sense. So let's see if my clicker works. It does. Right, so why are you guys here? Science, religion, why is that an issue? What's the rub? Just maybe give me some headlines, okay? What's the issue? Why is it a problem? Evolution. Okay, and why is it, okay, yes, keep going. That's probably, is that the only problem we have in terms of science and religion, or are there other problems? Say again? Chance. Okay, oh, as in science says we live in a random universe and religion says no, God wills it, or something like that, or God has a plan. Okay, good. Age of the earth. Okay, yeah, so are we a few thousand, are we a few billion? Eternal life, yes, no. Does it exist? Is that where you're going? Yes. Source of life, okay, are we here because we are intended? Or are we just here because some purposeless process that didn't have us in mind popped us out? Okay, keep going. Identity, sorry, I didn't get the rest. Race and identity. Oh, okay, because science has something to say about that, religion has something to say about that, or Christianity specifically. Okay. Oh yeah, okay, so are we alone? Okay. Fossils, okay, and what do we do with that? And I suppose that plays into the evolution thing as well. Okay, yeah, origins, basically, where do we come from? So, you guys are doing really well. Okay, so actually the one you haven't mentioned, but I sort of did a representative survey of 2 people just before this meeting, and they both had something to say around, yeah, but what about the existence of God? This vibe of hasn't science disproven God? So there's one like that as well. Maybe also, so who we are, the nature of mankind, how we know things. Are we good? Are we bad? Are we a mix? Okay, science has something to say. Religion has something to say. Even you kind of were skirting around that free will. Okay, actually, science has something to say about that. Religion has something to say about that. So, is religion just psychological or genetic? Is God just a brain state? That would be a science and religion discussion. So notice what's actually happening is that in all the important issues, we're actually having a science and religion discussion, okay, on issues of origin, on issues of destiny, on issues of identity, who we are, on issues of what is the problem with the world, how do we solve it. All of these things are science and religion kind of a conversations. And these are important conversations. These conversations matter. And just to get us going, I'm hoping the video works, is I'm going to let us have a 1-minute glimpse into one of those discussions, a science and religion discussion. So the movie is a little bit old by now. I don't know, seen Contact? Contact? I mean, it's, Yeah, it's probably at least 20 years old by now, but it's kind of the go-to movie for the relationship between science and religion. And if I just sketch the scene very briefly, the two main characters in the movie are, so Jodie Foster is the science babe, and he, Matthew McConaughey, is the religion jock. And they, in the movie, they have a relationship with each other, and it sort of in some way symbolizes the relationship between science and religion. Let me play you one conversation that they have.
I got one for you.
What do you got?
Occam's Razor. You've ever heard of it?
Occam's Razor sounds like some slasher movie.
No, Occam's Razor. It's a basic scientific principle. And it says, all things being equal, the simplest explanation tends to be the right one.
Makes sense to me.
All right. So what's more likely? Thank you.
You're welcome.
An all-powerful, mysterious God created the universe and then decided not to give any proof of his existence. Or that he simply doesn't exist at all. And that we created him so we wouldn't have to feel so small and alone.
I don't know. I couldn't imagine living in a world where God didn't exist. No. I wouldn't want to.
How do you know you're not deluding yourself? I mean, for me, I need proof.
Proof. Did you love your father?
What?
Your dad, did you love him?
Yes, very much.
Prove it.
You can see what he's basically doing to her. He's taking her to a place where she also realizes that there are some things that we very much hold to be true and hold to be important, but we cannot prove scientifically. So in this case, her love for her father. Okay. So I just enjoyed that sort of interaction. Now, what we're going to do in the session now, and maybe it's not exactly what you expected, and I'm quite okay with that. Instead of sort of diving in and having some of the detailed conversations, which might actually get quite technical, between science and religion or science and Christianity, I'm going to invite us just to take a step back and to watch ourselves have those conversations and to watch what is happening when we have those conversations. And one of the things that I think is happening is that often when we have these debates or these disagreements, it's because we have different understandings on what the relationship between science and religion, or specifically science and Christianity, might be. So what I'm going to sketch for us, just briefly, whirlwind tour, are 4 ways of understanding the relationship between science and religion. And what we're going to get to is the 4th one, the last one, is going to be the recommended model. But I just want us to be aware of all of those. Now, why? What's the so what here? Why are we doing that? Well, I'm hoping that it'll help us understand better what is happening in these discussions where we might be talking right past each other. Why? Because we have different understandings of how science and religion connect or don't connect. So if we understand which paradigm each of us is in, it makes more meaningful and more fruitful discussion possible. And I think it'll help us understand, well, ourselves. It'll help us understand others. It'll also help us understand reality better. All of these have some truth in them, but as I said, the last one is the recommended model. I've come across other lists that maybe have 3 different models and 5. You choose. I'm giving you this one. Let me start with the first one. So the first one would be the enemy's view of science and religion. So basically, in this view, we would say science and religion are at war, and one of them has to budge. There has to be a winner and a loser. And of course, as wars go, each blames the other for the war. So in this view, you would have 2 competing ways to determine truth. And one of them is scientific, and the other one is religious. And the only way to resolve the conflict is basically to make severe compromises on the one side or the other. So I think you get that. They're kind of, they get in each other's way. They play in the same space. They are enemies. This view, I would hazard a guess that that one would have been more prominent, let's say, 2 decades ago, or maybe even 1 decade ago, than it is now. I think we're sort of generally moving a little bit away from that view. That's my personal opinion. But just to sketch that a little bit, remember each side could be the one that's sort of trying to throw missiles over the wall. And so it could be science or it could be religion throwing those missiles. So in terms of, let's say, science throwing those, and these, now all these books are a little bit older, and these come from the, the famous new atheists, and you may recognize some of those names. And you can see even just from those titles, right? The God delusion, God isn't great, etc. The bottom right, there's a video series, The Root of All Evil. And what is the root of all evil? Well, it's religion in terms of the worldview of that series. And I only have so much time, and I don't want to pick on anybody in particular, but just the guy top left, Richard Dawkins. One of his quotes would have been, "Faith is indeed one of the world's greatest evils, comparable to the smallpox virus, but harder to eradicate." Okay, so you see this idea of the, science and religion are direct competitors as total explanations. But clearly in his view, well, let me quote again, "Religion is no longer a serious candidate in the field of explanation. It is completely superseded by science." And you can see what's happening. Notice the absolutist language there, okay, completely. If science can't measure it, then it doesn't exist. And I think, he is sort of, at least at the time, didn't sort of seem to have any room for the possibility that science and religion might want to explain different things at different levels. In terms of this sort of waging war, I think what's actually happening more frequently than not is that it's not science versus religion, but it's actually scientism versus religion. So ism, whenever you add an ism at the end, it becomes this total and only way of seeing things. And now just do a comparison there between these two statements, just to illustrate the point. Okay, so humans are a collection of molecules, or humans are nothing but a collection of molecules. Do you see the difference? Okay, so I would call the first one science and the second one scientism. Why? Because the first one, I mean, that's true. It goes with the evidence. Okay, we are a collection of molecules. But the second one actually goes further than the evidence allows. To say, yes, but that is all we are. Okay, it's actually a leap of faith. It's a statement of faith. It goes further than science would allow. Okay, and that's why I'm calling it scientism. And I think often when we see that sort of war going on, chances are it's not science. Chances are it's scientism and religion. Just briefly, just to acknowledge, there's also, you could from the religion side also have war being fought. I don't know whether, if somebody tells you, oh man, science is human wisdom and not of God, or whatever. I think that's probably now the war being fought from the other side. And it's, I would probably, gently challenge that view a little bit in terms of, if something is human wisdom, does it mean it necessarily is not from God? Does it mean that God created us with our minds and then wants us not to use them? Doesn't make sense. Right? But I mean, we can dive very deeply into that. I need to really go rapid fire, so I hope you guys are with me on this. The second view would be the view of master-servant. So basically what we have here is we do have a working relationship, but it's not a relationship of equals. And in this view, and I think this one's a little bit more on the increase now, it will usually be science as the master and then religion as the servant. So basically in this view, for example, what we would say is we seem to have evolved the tendency to be religious. And that's great, that's fine. We don't have to fight against it. Religion might even be useful to help us preserve our species. And religion is useful to have. It may not actually be true, but it is useful. We're not against religion. Religion has social value. It gives us community. It gives us a sense of fulfillment. But then if we wanted to talk about, so it's really useful stuff. But if we wanted to talk about truth, we would need to talk about science. Can you sort of feel that view a little bit? Okay, so you can see how then religion is actually subservient to science, because science tells religion where it can play. okay, and what its limits are. Religion can provide perspective, can make us more empathetic, and help us cope with pain, etc. So in this view, there would be an acknowledgement that religion can go where science can't. So religion is useful as a kind of social glue, something that gives us continuity, something that holds us together. But when we want to talk truth, then let's rather talk science. Okay, I think you got that. Now, I mean, I'm not offering you comprehensive critiques of each one, but in some ways, it's a little bit like wanting the fruits of religion without the roots. And actually interesting, just because I mentioned Dawkins a bit earlier this year, he actually called himself a cultural Christian. And he meant that as a, not as a negative, neutral or even positive. So there's certain things about, Christianity culturally that he enjoys and prefers over other options. Okay, but there again, can you see he is enjoying the fruit, but he doesn't actually want the root. So to commend the benefits of religion without truth is a little bit like commending the benefits of marriage without a spouse, or of music with no sound. Okay, it doesn't quite work that way. Good. Should I? I know I'm going to forever chase time. Let me quickly do this one. Who's been to Marbach? It's an hour's drive down the road. Not so many people, right? So I know that at the time when they initially started it, that they basically Marbach tells a story, and it tells the story of our evolution, and it's symbolized in some ways in the walk between the entrance and the exit. Entrance all undeveloped, grassy; exit all technological and stuff. And so as you walk between the two, it's sort of one long path, and it tells the story of how we moved from here to there. And as they were sort of designing the story, they ran against this thing of, oh, hang on, we don't have anything about science and religion in our story. And then the way they solved it is that somewhere towards the end of the story, they said, oh, isn't it wonderful how we evolved the ability to be religious and to ask meaning questions and things like that. Now, can you see what they're doing? They're in the master-servant paradigm, and can you see how they probably wouldn't have engaged anybody who's in the enemy's paradigm at all? Okay, because if I'm in the enemy's paradigm and I go and I go through those exhibits, I'm sort of going, guys, I have a problem with the whole exhibit. You just added a bit of flavor at the end. I want to question the whole story. Okay, do you see how then this is a way that we can miss each other? Okay, so let me move on rapidly. The third view of the relationship between science and religion is that they don't have a relationship, that they live in totally different places, and they happily leave each other alone. They're not at war, so everybody has their own turf, but there is no relationship. So science and, let's say, Christianity are both valid, but they apply to different realms. And we might say maybe science, the natural; theology, the supernatural; or how versus why. Science is more the how, religion is more the why. So if, for example, I ask the question about, why is the kettle boiling, then I can answer at the science level, and I can give you the how. Okay, so there are certain scientific processes or processes that science can analyze that are happening when the kettle's boiling. But it doesn't answer the question of why did I boil the kettle. It's so that I can have a relaxing cup of tea. Okay, so can you see how in this view now they are strangers? Science tells us the how, religion tells us the why, or perhaps other words would be science is about mechanism, religion is about meaning. Okay, so they both have their domains, their spheres of the questions. They ask and answer different questions. Apparently Galileo once said, science tells you how the heavens go, and the Bible tells you how to go to heaven. Probably slightly, with a slight stab, but okay. Religion isn't the enemy of science. It's a valuable and necessary counterpart. They both have autonomous domains. Where the two domains do end up fighting is because one of them tried to step on the turf of the other one. Okay, but as long as everybody stays in their lane, everything's fine. Okay, and I think this. Oh, here's an example of this. And by the way, I will sort of. I think I'll go along with that one. So as we look at some of the difficult discussions around Genesis 1 and 2. What I might say in this paradigm is I would probably say, well, the Genesis account is a whodunit, not a howdunit. Okay, so it was never meant to be a scientific textbook, and it shouldn't be read as a science textbook. It's God's love letter to us. Okay, it's a song of creation. If you look at the genre, especially of Genesis 1, you can see through all the repetition, and there's a chorus. It's poetry. It's not poetry isn't meaning to be scientifically accurate. So can you see what you could potentially go there? And I think I would largely just full disclosure would probably go there as that one. And so this view is partially correct. The Bible was never intended to be a science textbook. Shouldn't read it as such. Science cannot and never will be able to answer question of meaning, and we shouldn't expect it to. Now, that's not dissing science. It's just saying it's outside of the scope of science. Science and religion do have different objects of interest. Okay, the mass of an electron versus the nature of the Trinity. Okay, they're looking at different things, and that's okay. But now, one of the problems with the view is that I don't think it's always easy to keep them nicely separate like that. There will be touch points. There will be overlaps. So, there may be some religions that you can keep totally separate from any scientific inquiry, but I don't think Christianity is one of those, because, Christianity makes claims about things that happen in time and in space. Right, so think of Old Testament. There, it talks about a flood, and so we would expect to find, as we do, evidence of that. Or it talks about the death and resurrection of Jesus, and so it talks about very real happenings. It's not just some abstraction or some otherworldly reality. Okay, it happens here, and so there will be touch points, and that at those touch points there will be either conflict or agreement. And we do need to struggle with that. Perhaps another point to be made is another potential pitfall. If you try and keep them totally separate, is that if science is the place where we apply our minds and we test things and we use our our research abilities and our scrutiny, and we put everything up for questioning and doubting. And but then in the faith domain, we can put anything we want and we exclude it from any scrutiny. Then, of course, the problem becomes is that you can put anything into that domain. Okay, then you can't keep the crazies out. Okay, so if we do this total separation and we exclude faith or any religion from scrutiny, that would be a pitfall of that. Here's the recommended, I think, view, and I've started to move there, which is the siblings model. So the idea of that, you know how it is with siblings. They have different but sometimes overlapping interests. They are related. They squabble a bit on occasion, but on the whole, they get on. They believe whatever squabbles they have are resolvable. They have the same father, and perhaps just to illustrate that then as well, I think Francis Bacon first talked about that God has actually written two books, okay? The book of basically Word and World, right? So the book of Scripture and the book of nature. And they have the same, and theology or religion is the study of one and science is the study of the other. And so we have a common father type of a situation here. And then as we, as humans, look at these two, we should find a lot of agreement. Sometimes it looks like they don't seem to gel. And there's almost, because this is a sibling relationship, there's a little bit of this, I think this vibe of, well, if we're not gelling today, let's just relax. Let's look at how it looks like tomorrow. Okay, so when something doesn't seem to match, it could be that maybe our connection with the Bible isn't exactly how it should be. some of the difficult passages, maybe we're not understanding them well. Or our connection with, being able to see how the universe functions. Or maybe there's even something inside of us, okay, that sometimes distorts. Okay, we're not only truth seekers, sometimes we're truth twisters. We need to be honest about those sort of realities as well. So where science and religion don't seem to sort of line up, well, we have different places to look. And both, I suppose, science is progressing. There's more and more discoveries, theories get adapted, get refined. And I think religion progresses as well. Okay, now I don't mean this in a relativist, I'm not pulling a relativism stunt on you, okay? The word is unchanging, but I think our ability to understand it perhaps is changing. Think about, 200 years ago, we would have read past the bits that would have stopped us from doing slavery, for example. Okay, now we've moved on, and praise God, we've moved on. Okay, so maybe it's like that as both become better at their fields, that then maybe what science sees and what religion sees is able to work together better. Let me just for lack of time leave some of that. So basically, then, in terms of, let me give you some thoughts on that fourth one, on this idea of that science and religion do have touch points. Let me give you another clip. It's a very short clip from the movie. This is actually the first time the two main characters meet. And he's busy writing a book on religion. And she works for SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. But she's a little bit embarrassed to tell him that she's searching for little green men in outer space. So notice how she answers his question. And then also notice how he answers her question.
What are you studying up there?
The usual. Nebulae, quasars, pulsars, stuff like that. What are you writing?
The usual. Nouns, adverbs, adjective here and there.
Okay, so you see again what he's doing. He's calling her on how she is answering the question. He's asking, what are you studying? And she is answering, but she is not answering at the level that he was intending the question to be. Okay, and then he is answering her question at the same level. What are you writing? Well, I'm writing verbs and nouns and adjectives. Okay, now here's the point, right? You can give an answer at that level, right? Actually, it gets even more profound than that. There is nothing about what he is writing that you cannot explain in terms of verb, noun, adjective, adverb, etc. Right? You will have a full explanation at that level. Okay? There's no sort of gaps for God to fill here. If you're sort of trying to do the God of the gaps, that I can only have God where I have a gap in my explanation, well, there's no room for God, if that's your view, right? But what if we're making a level mistake, so to speak? Okay, so just because I have a full explanation at that level doesn't mean that's the only level there exists. Okay, so here's another way to illustrate it, just changing the metaphor slightly. Okay, why does the ball move? Okay, now I can answer the question by saying the ball moves because of forces acting on it. I can answer the question by saying the ball moves because someone kicks it. And you see now I've gone to a different level and I've started to introduce some personal intent into my answer. And I might also say the ball moves because the Springboks are playing the All Blacks. Okay? Now, if I just stay at the level of it moves because of forces, can you see how I would be missing out on so much of reality? If I take whatever he's writing, or if I take, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, and I say it's got so many nouns, or it's got so many A's and so many E's and so many three-letter words. I can do that, and I can completely explain what's happening at that level. But I'm going to rob myself of so much of what reality is about, of what life is about. So maybe this, this touch points thing, maybe something around the relationship between science and religion, or specifically Christianity. has something to do with that. Okay, just because you can explain everything about the universe in terms of protons, electrons, neutrons, or their constituents, okay, that doesn't mean that that is the only layer at which reality happens, at which reality exists. Okay. Maybe just briefly as a last thought, some of the places where I didn't go, because some of them, as I said, you can quite rabbit hole them, is what if God is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end of science? Okay, so I'm just going to give you this as pointers of where you could go with your conversations, but this is the part where you probably need to do a bit more research than we can do in a half-hour talk. So in terms of the Alpha, one place you could go is just you can look at the history of science and realize how so many so much of the scientific endeavor and so many scientists actually were Christians. Okay, maybe not all of them would have been sort of nice evangelical Christians, but they would have been God people. Okay, they would have believed in God. So whether you have Francis Bacon, who I mentioned, or Boyle, or Newton, or Faraday, or Maxwell. I don't know if some of these names mean, that's out of electromagnetism, Mendel, genetic theory, Francis Collins, who from the Human Genome Project at the time, when they sort of decoded the human DNA for the first time, etc., etc. These people are all theists. Okay, they're all God believers. So you could go there. You could also go to the point of assumptions where there's a important case to be made that actually science needs faith. Okay? Every endeavor, including science, needs to make some core assumptions that it can't prove within itself. Okay? So science would, for example, make the assumption that we have senses that don't deceive us. So we can do scientific experimentation, and we can have minds that actually don't deceive us either, and that function properly, and that there's a real universe out there that can be investigated in that way, and that the laws of nature are constant and faithful. Okay, there's all sorts of assumptions that science makes, which, and this is kind of like the plot twist, which Christianity provides a proper base for these assumptions of science. The philosophical foundations of science are actually consistent with a biblical worldview. So you could go, what if it is actually God who makes science possible? What if he made the world so that it can be understood, and made us so that we can understand? Okay, lots more that you can do in that space, but just to mention that. And then in terms of the Omega, the end of science, what if science also points to God, or points to some of the realities that the Bible describes for us? And you can talk about origin, so whether it's the origin of the universe, did we come out of nothing? So that this idea of everything that begins must have a cause, and what is that cause? Because the universe had a beginning, or the beginning of life, or the beginning of information, because DNA is information, right? So you could go there. Design of life, even more interesting, I think, to some of the serious scientists, is just the argument from fine-tuning, that the universe and the initial conditions, as well as the laws of physics, seem to be incredibly fine-tuned to make any of this possible. So that if, for example, you were to change the initial expansion rate of the universe by just a billionth this way or that way, we wouldn't have a universe as we now know it. Okay, so if it would have been too fast in expanding, then it wouldn't have allowed stars and planets to form, and we wouldn't be here. If it would have been too slow, together with gravitational constants and all sorts of other fine-tuning, then it would have just collapsed back in on itself. And so the whole endeavor actually looks incredibly fine-tuned for our existence. And that is something that's actually not controversial. Okay, that's something that even atheist scientists would concede to. Consciousness is another biggie, I think, and another sort of area that I think is currently being investigated, where science is trying very hard to explain what consciousness is, and it's running against what we sometimes call the hard problem of consciousness. What makes, I don't know, molecules come together in a particular configuration, and suddenly they say, I. Where does consciousness come from? it looks like it cannot be explained as an emergent property from some of those lower levels of explanation. Okay? And again, think back at the examples that I gave you. Okay? What the guy is writing in his book is not an emergent property from the ink on the paper or from the letters or from the words. Okay? It doesn't come out of the wash. It's designed in, top down, right? And then morality as well. Okay, the argument from morality and the fact that science cannot meaningfully go from an is to an ought. Science describes what is. You run yourself into some problems if you try and base the ought on the is. Because let's say, for example, I observe, oh, the is, well, survival of the fittest. Okay, now you try and base a morality or an ethic on that, you're not going to do very well. Okay, so one can have those sort of discussions. Or, morality is, therefore God is. If you want any objective basis for morality, you do need to have some lawgiver for that morality. There's those sort of arguments. Sorry that I'm not deep diving into each one of them. I'm just giving you some places that one could potentially go with that. So there's your summary. I was wondering, just to make it a little bit real, John, I'm going to get in trouble, but actually we also start a little bit late. Can I do another 5 minutes and then questions? Okay, let's try this. So on each one of these, it's wonderful what you find if you Google science and religion. Okay, so the examples I give you, just think of in terms of those four, okay, enemies, master servants, strangers, siblings. What do you see? So whoever made this slide or this picture, okay, science flies you to the moon, religion flies you into buildings. What paradigm were they in when they... Okay, enemies probably, right? And notice it's also not a fair comparison. It's comparing the best of science with the worst of religion. That's not a fair comparison. Okay. What about this one? This is a Nobel Prize winner, and he's taking a swing at intelligent design and says, science says nothing about intelligent design, and intelligent design brings nothing to science and should be taught in theology, not science classes. Okay, you can see what sort of debate you're listening in on here. Okay, what paradigm? Okay, probably strangers, right? It's like, oh, you're doing your intelligent design thing, go to religion class, don't bring it to science. Okay, whereas, of course, the intelligent design people would say, no, hang on, we're not doing religion here. We're saying, what is the scientific inference to the best explanation? Do we see evidence of design in life forms or don't we? Okay, and what would we infer from that? So that's one of those things of the stranger's view doesn't quite work because we're not agreed on what the boundary line is. Okay, some time ago, Time magazine covered the God gene. So does our DNA make us religious? And then it even had plus a quiz. How spiritual are you? Okay, so is there something in our genes that makes us religious? What view? Yeah, probably master servant. Okay, that science is the master. And okay, here's I suppose a fairly famous one where the first man in space was a Soviet cosmonaut, Yuri Gagarin, and I suppose he felt he had to toe the party line, and as he was out there in space, he said something along the lines of, I don't see any God up here. Okay, because of course, the party line was be atheist, be non-religious. So where's he, what's he advocating? Which paradigm? I think he's saying God doesn't exist. So I think he's going enemies. And then, of course, the interesting thing is, he's doing the level mistake. What was he expecting to see? Angels on harps. So it's a little bit like it's a little bit like there is no cabinet maker. I couldn't find him anywhere in the wardrobe. Okay, maybe you weren't looking in the right way in the right place. Okay, let's keep. You get great T-shirts. What view? Or maybe, the science one is gobbling up the faith one, so maybe that's an enemies one as well. This was interesting. Science, left brain thinking, religion, right brain thinking. What are they trying? Maybe strangers. I suppose it depends on how connected or disconnected they think the two hemispheres of the brain are. So maybe they're trying to do the siblings view. I mean, I would certainly challenge that, okay? I mean, I don't think it's quite that simple. I think we do science with both sides of the brain. We do religion with both sides of the brain. It's much more integrated than that.